Welcome everyone to Peter Svidler versus Vidit Gujrathi, the fourth classical game and the final classical one. Vidit is leading the match with 6 points to 3 points here, and Peter Svidler must strike here with the white pieces. Vidit, in his customary moment of silence before the game, c4 has been played by Peter Svidler, the English opening, and you can see Vidit comes with a Starbucks coffee for himself during the game, just to keep himself awake. And in the background you can see the beautiful hall in Naivedyam North Star, and that's Vidit's family. Vedika is here, his mother, father, and also Raunak's father sitting there. There Vidit rises up from his meditative pose, writes down the move, and it's time to get going. What is his move going to be? Is he going to play e6? That's what he played in game number 2, but here he goes for e5 and he hits the center, and a strong move here. E5 is well known as one of the main lines against the English. Peter goes g3, the fianchetto system, and he wants to put his bishop on g2, knight on c3, and be flexible. Vidit develops his knight to f6, all very standard stuff here. Bishop comes out to g2, and now it's an important moment. Do you go knight to c6? Do you go d5? Vidit in fact chooses c6, and this is actually a bit similar to Sicilian Alpin with reversed color c3 Sicilian. E takes d4 is one of the main moves, and there you take advantage of the pawn being on c6 so that the knight cannot develop here. But Vidit pushes forward with e4. Ambitious play by the Indian player. e4 has been played in many games before, but a3 by Svidler is rare. Only 11 games have been played until now, but Vidit is very well prepared. He goes d5 and sort of gets his center together. Knight comes out to c3, and Vidit simply develops and tells Peter that, look, I have extra space here because of my strong pawn chain. What are you going to do about it? Peter says, I'm going to attack it, I'm going to kill it. And now you cannot really keep sort of defending the e4 pawn, so you need to exchange it. You need to take on f3, and when you do that, it gives back some of the space and the knight comes out. So while this is great for white, he's got back his space, there are weaknesses down the e file. e3 square is weak, e4 square is weak, and so on. So black castles it out, and now white also short castles here. You can look at the time on the clock. Vidit hasn't used much of his time. He's well prepared, and here he pushes his pawn to h6. Interesting move. He is stopping the knight from coming to g5 in future. Also the bishop coming to g5, and after h6 you can see there Vidit walking around, and he is very confident. Also Nigel Short in the background. He's playing a match against Raunak Sadhwani. It's a lot of space given to the players, so they can actually move around, and it is very well organized. There on the stage you have both the matches, and there's this big screen where people can follow the moves. Okay, Peter very focused. He's thinking about the game of Grishchuk, which he remembers happened in this position, and Grishchuk had actually gone perhaps c takes d5. That's what he remembered in the post-game analysis, and he wanted to play something different. So he goes knight h4 and gives up the c4 pawn to Vidit, and Vidit naturally captures it. Vidit says, thank you so much, Peter, for that pawn. I don't know how you're going to take it back because I can even protect it with b5. Peter says, I don't need your pawn. I have my knight on f5, and this is a very pesky piece. Looking at e7, g7 and h6, I don't think Vidit can tolerate that knight on f5 any longer. He must snap it off. It's such a dominating knight, you must get rid of it, but in the process you have given back the bishop pair, and so now both the players are off the board. Peter comes back and he takes on f5 with his rook. So Vidit has a solid extra pawn, but white's idea is very clear. He wants to play e4. Now imagine if you play the most natural move here, which is knight bd7. White simply plays e4, and you are under pressure now. You could go queen b6, but then once again there are ideas like knight a4, kicking the queen off. What is the queen doing on b6 is not so clear. The main move here is c5. If you play this move, the point is it's very difficult to play it because the pawn on b7 is hanging. And the idea is that here you can play queen d7 with a double attack. Will Vidit find c5? Because if he plays c5, he's in brilliant form. You can see he wants to make a move and he's already taken 12 minutes for this move. But finding c5 is like you are solving all your opening problems, because either he has to go d5 blocking his bishop, or he has to allow knight coming out to c6. He plays c5. Beautiful. He finds it. He finds the move c5, and I think this shows that Vidit is really in great form in this match. He pushes his pawn to c5, and now the bishop can take on b7 and Peter can calculate it out. But after queen d7, bishop a8, queen f5, e4, queen to h3, black is doing excellently well. So do you want to go into such tactics which your opponent has calculated well, or do you want to do something else? Because even if you go and take this pawn on c5, black can simply develop his knight on c6, and he is doing exceedingly well here. So it's a tough moment for Peter Svidler here to decide what his move is going to be. Bishop d7, I guess, is something he may not want to do, because he's also playing for a win here. It's important for him to fight it out with the white piece. But if he loses, then the deficit would be 6 points in the match going into rapid and blitz, and that is a bit too much. So with taking all of that into consideration, he pushes his pawn to d5. Now this pawn is going to be blockaded. Bishop d6, knight d7, and so on. Then the e5 square would be weak. But Vidit actually blockades it very quickly, bishop d6, but now knight b5. This is what Peter had in mind, so that you can't naturally go knight d7. Your bishop is hanging on d6, and if you can't go knight d7, what do you play? Rook e8. Very nice move, very very useful move, because this rook is going to be super important down the e file. You can take this bishop. He takes it. Knight takes d6. Vidit must recapture. Queen takes d6, and now if you could just play bishop to f4. Very nice move. And now you might want to attack this rook on f5, but the problem is he'll just sacrifice an exchange here, and after e4, this is just a lost position with the queen coming here. So that's the reason why Vidit goes with his queen to b6, so that he keeps an eye on the f6 knight. But Peter says, well, with d6, what I'm doing is I'm threatening rook takes f6, and I'm opening up the bishop's path. So very important moment here, and Vidit must go knight b d7 to protect his knight on f6. He goes knight d7. Amazing move. This is very good. Now black is a pawn up. He's completed his development. Queen d2 played to defend the b2 pawn. Next up, just double rook e6, rook e8 would be fantastic, and Vidit plays it. He is playing such good chess. He's playing perhaps some of the best chess of his life right now. Rook e6, and he now has a very tangible advantage here. Peter has to do something, because otherwise Vidit is just going to bring his other rook in. He has a queenside majority here. The knight can jump into e4. There are so many things happening, and so Peter goes e4, and he challenges Vidit. Take the pawn on e4 if you can, because this is a free pawn. And by the way, this is the best move. Takes, rook takes, and now bishop h6 is what Peter has in mind. And the point is, if you take g takes h6, I'm simply going to swoop in, and this is a lost position. My attack is just too strong. Rook g5 is coming up. But the best move here is to bring your rook back to e6, not to take the bishop, but then you have to calculate bishop g7, king g7, rook f1, f6, a sacrifice of the rook, queen coming in, rook g6, another check, king goes back, another check, king here, check, king up, rook comes in, and somehow black manages to hold this. It's actually better for black here. So in a way, with all this calculation, taking the pawn on e4 is the best move, and Vidit would be almost close to winning this game if he finds it. Another idea here is to play c3, and the point is, after b takes c3, you then take, and if your opponent takes here, you go c4 check. And the point now is that after king h1, you can play queen c6, and this is also very useful. So this idea with c3 pawn sacrifice is a very, very important one also that Vidit can keep in his mind. So there are two moves, both connected with knight e4, but then you could insert rook, pawn to c3, or you can go back rook e6. But Vidit does not take the pawn. He is not taking it, and Peter Svidler pushes forward with e5, a good move. Vidit takes on e5, but I guess he is missing something here. Knight e5, now you can just take on e5 in this position, and that's what he's going to do. He's going to take with the bishop or the rook. Oh, he takes with the rook. Here, rook takes e5, and now Vidit must recapture it. Yes, rook takes e5, and then bishop e5 is going to be played, and then you take here. Now the d pawn is extremely strong, so in that sense, after rook takes e5, that is a very, very powerful pawn, and it can push forward to d7. That's exactly what Svidler does. He pushes his pawn to d7, and now it is queening. Vidit has two options. One is to go back with his queen to d8, passive, and the point is after rook d1, b5, let's say, by the way, if you take here, then just bishop h3 is fantastic. You can't take, by the way, queen d7 because of this very nice deflection, rook e1, but bishop h3 is strong. f5, go back bishop f1, and this is what Vidit had missed, because now this coming in, this is hanging, there's no rook e1 check, and it is completely better here for white is completely fine. Rook e7, bishop takes c4. So Vidit makes the pragmatic choice of not going for queen d8. He in fact just takes the knight, takes the pawn with his knight, and Svidler takes back, queen takes d7, and Vidit chops off the pawn. Let's have a stock of the pawns left on the board. Black has 7 pawns, white has 3, but white has an extra bishop, which means black has 4 pawns for the bishop. Excellent compensation here. Rook d1 played, and now Vidit can just simply play his queen to e2, staying in the thick of things, but he takes the pawn on a3, and that is risky, because after queen c8 check, king h7, there is a very interesting check here, bishop e4 check, and you must go. Oh, he plays it bishop e4, g6 played, and now queen takes b7 by Peter Svidler. By the way, very important to note, you can't take on e4 because of queen f5 and you lose the rook. So that's the reason why g6, queen takes b7, the king has to go to g7, very important. And now rook d7 played, fantastic move. Rook d7, f7 under pressure, you can't go queen e3 check because of king f1, and white is simply winning here. But Vidit goes queen a1 check, and very important move. Now you can either move your king up, or you can go bishop d1, but bishop b1 actually fails to check, king here, and now a very important move, queen f6, which is easy to miss, because now you have defended this, you are threatening a mate here, the bishop is under pressure with the rook, and that is big trouble. So actually Peter thinking here, he has to move his king up. Yes, he goes king f2, the best move. Both the players actually navigating these complications very well with even less time on the clock. Vidit has less than 10 minutes here. The king moves up to f3. Now the f7 pawn needs to be defended in some way or the other, and the best move here is to push the pawn to c3, and Vidit does so. He pushes the pawn to c3, and now the f7 pawn is defended very, very well. What does Peter Svidler do here? He needs to find some play, otherwise the pawns are very strong. He goes rook d6, very important move, because if you go something like rook e7, I have c2 winning the game. So rook d6 threatens, rook takes g6 check, as the pawn on f7 is pinned by the queen, and Vidit rightly puts his rook back. Queen comes to d5, another fine move here found by Peter Svidler. Under pressure, he's been defending brilliantly here, because now if you take the queen, then rook takes queen, and white is simply fine because c5 is hanging. But if you play rook f6 check, that's what he's done, rook takes f6, Vidit can now chop off the queen. Bishop must take it back, and here bishop takes d5, and now there are two options. One is to go into this endgame and fight it out with king f6, but the position is kind of equal here after this. But Vidit plays this amazing move c2, And guys, notice this. White is a rook and a bishop up, but the pawn on c2 is so powerful, it cannot be stopped, and so black must give perpetual with rook f8, rook f7. There is no way out of it, and this is completely winning for black if he does anything else. So he must agree to a draw here. Peter Svidler thinks for a bit, sees if there is any study-like win here to be had. He goes rook f8 check and offers a draw. The draw could have happened with king g7, rook f7 and repetition. And what a game. The score is now 7-4 in the favor of Vidit Gujrathi.